Light as a feather, stiff as a board. Light as a feather, stiff as a board.
We are the weirdos, mister.
Black as night, erase death from our sight. White as light, mighty hectate make it right.
I myself am strange and unusual. Cast a circle, spark some incense, and grab a cup of tea, because it's time for the Cousins Coven podcast. I'm Sharon.
And this is Wendy. Welcome back to the Coven. So today we're talking about the Order of the Golden Dawn. I wanted to kind of talk about some little catch-up stuff first.
Yeah, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, so today I have, so I told you I was going to watch in anticipation that we were talking about the Order of the Golden Dawn. I found this TV show called The Order on Netflix.
Yeah, I saw that come up. What was that all about?
So it talks about the Order of the Blue Rose is what they called it instead of the Golden Dawn. And I watched it. I mean, it's not the greatest show. I did have kind of a favorite quote out of it was to be your own moral compass, which I thought was, you know, we should all be kind of our own moral compass.
Unless you're an asshole or a murderer.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But I don't think those people are listening to this show. So, it's just kind of, it's not like I want to knock the show. It wasn't the worst show I've ever watched. It wasn't the best show that I've ever watched. I just felt that it was a synchronicity that I came across the show when I was getting ready to study the Order of the Golden Dawn. So I was just like, sweet, I'm going to watch this. I didn't finish the series. They had like 10 episodes. I think I got through 8. Just didn't have time to watch the other 2, but
I know exactly what you mean, because it's really weird once you start looking into something specific and then you just notice it all around you everywhere. And you're like, did I come to be drawn to this thing by some outside force? This collective consciousness that we're all craving this weird knowledge?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then I just had one little other kind of thing that I wanted to share with everybody. It's kind of this cute little story. So I celebrated my birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And happy birthday to you too.
Right? We have
I know that
similar birthdays.
Back-to-back birthdays practically. I know that by the time this airs, it'll be, couple weeks, for a week and a half, 2 weeks from now. But my little story is I was driving home from work. I had to work on my birthday, which everybody usually does, right? It's such a bummer. But life is life. So I'm driving home, and I kind of had like this, wasn't the greatest day, and it was just packed filled with work. I took so many phone calls. I just felt like I was so busy. And usually on my drive home, I'm kind of unwinding and thinking about my day and trying to shake off any excess negative energy that I might be trying to bring home with me. And then I see in front of me in the middle of the road these 2 doves. They're just so beautiful, white doves. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's spring. The doves are out. And they both fly up into the air and do this kind of almost like mating where they're flying, intertwining each other, flying around each other. And then they land up on top of this wire and look down. And I was reminded right at that very second of our Aunt Debbie, because she always used to love doves. And when it came close to her passing, there were doves all over in my neighborhood, and they had never been there before. Like, I constantly saw doves. And so it reminded me of her, and just that maybe that was her sending the doves to tell me happy birthday, and that she was still watching over me. So I thought that was just totally sweet. And I just kind of felt her presence when I was looking at them.
That's really, really cool. And
yeah,
I'm definitely a believer in all of that. Like, birds are some of the greatest things I love looking out for when I'm out and about in nature anyway, as signs from like spirits or gods and goddesses. And
yes,
I definitely think Debbie is a communicator with her loved ones.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. She is just such a warm-hearted woman. And I just love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'm going to look for any Debbie signs today.
Yes, you should.
So I know we had a lot to get through today, but we were going to be completing our elemental series on fire magic. So let's go ahead and move on to cauldron topics.
Okay, so I am going to round us out on this fire magic. So I did a little bit of research and found out that it's associated with the season of summer. and the zodiac signs of Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. Some stones that you can incorporate into fire magic are red in nature, and those examples would be like bloodstones, red jasper, ruby, and obsidian. I know obsidian is black, but it's made from lava, and when it's cooled, it forms into this beautiful rock. And a lot of times they're shiny. I just love obsidian so much.
Me too. I feel like we grew up with a lot of it in our backyards.
Exactly.
I don't know where my mom got it, but it was like super common.
Yeah. Well, and I think it kind of goes back to Crater Lake. There was a lot of ash that had formed into obsidian when Crater Lake erupted years and years ago, which we talked about it on that episode of, what was it again? It was
Loch
Nessie.
Ness. Yeah, Nessie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes. So that's where it all came from in Oregon anyways. Let's see what else I found. So herbs typically used in fire magic cause a warming sensation when ingested or burned. So some examples would be like stinging nettles, garlic, chili, mustard, and even onion.
Oh my God, synchronicity. I'm drinking nettle tea right now.
Really?
Yes.
I love it.
That's really good for your allergies. And I always tell everyone who's super congested, go get yourself some nettle tea.
I need it.
Shout out to nettle.
Yes, I need some of that really bad because my allergies are really bad. So apologize for my congestion today. Let's see. Flowers related to fire magic would be red and orange. Some examples are like red dahlias and hydrangeas. Very beautiful. Fire magic is great to use for protection spells, healing spells, and anything related to anti-inflammatory issues, and sometimes also for letting go of the past, like past wounds, past bad feelings, that kind of thing.
I really love that, and I didn't know that was a thing, but it's a thing I do. So that was
good.
Great.
I love that.
Yeah, I never did it for anti-inflammatory issues, and I should.
Yeah,
so that one's new, and I'm going to definitely think about that going forward.
Love it. You can also use fire as a conduit to send offerings to different gods or goddesses, like burning different herbs or plants in recognition of them.
Mm-hmm.
Types of fire used may simply be a candle, but if you have a fire pit, barbecue, or a safe place for a fire, that works as well. One of my favorite things to use fire is to burn out things that are really bothering me. So for instance, and I think that you and I have talked about this before, if I'm holding on to that old baggage from a previous relationship or maybe old wounds, I tend to write a letter with all of my hate-filled words and get out all of that poison that's being held inside my heart. And I kind of say a blessing and then burn those words in hopes that it helps me deal with the past so I can be my best self now, which also prepares me for a great future. But what's crazy about that is that I've literally been doing that since I was probably in grade school, and I didn't even know that I was doing magic.
It's awesome. I think it's one of the more just like, what is the word? Your instincts. It's very instinctual to write down everything you need to get out, like almost like journaling in a sense.
Right.
Making a list of either things you want to manifest, things you want to banish. You get it all out there, and then you burn it and let it go.
Right.
So I agree. I've been doing things like that for a long time.
Nice. You're just like, I'm done with this. I'm done dealing with it.
Mm-hmm. I love an excuse to burn papers as well.
Yes.
Pyromancy.
Right. That's all I had. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Oh, no. I feel like I love it because that's exactly how I use my fire magic.
Good.
So burning for manifestations or for letting go. So, Well, we have a lot to cover, like we mentioned. So let's go ahead and move on. So today, like we mentioned, we are going to try to tackle the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And we're going to try to pull back the veil on the secret magical society. So the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was devoted to the study and practice of the occult sciences and the paranormal during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. They're steeped in mystery and hidden meanings, and the order is one of the main influences of its generation in regard to the paranormal and the witchcraft movement, leading to the many branches of modern magic that we use today. So we want to go back to the beginning and see how the secret society and magical system all began. So just keep in mind, this was back in like Great Britain in the early 1800s, and it was a time of like the industrialization movement and all those factories. Darwinism was kind of newer back then, and it was really radical, just changing people's opinions and thinking more like science instead of religion. And there were a lot of secret societies like the Freemasons, and there was also the spiritualist movement going on as well. So it was a really interesting time of change. And I know, Wendy, that you're really into the Golden Dawn. You know a lot about their history, so I want to just pass it on to you, and you kind of break it all down for us.
Okay, so let's get this started. So for those of you who don't know, the Golden Dawn system was based on hierarchy and initiation like the Masonic lodges. However, women were admitted on an equal basis with men. And it was founded in 1888 by a guy named Samuel Mathers and another one named William Woodman, and William Westcott, and disbanded around 1903. A little bit later than that, but I'll go into that a little bit later. So I did want to tell you just a little bit about these guys so we can kind of get a grasp on who they really were. William Westcott was a coroner and a Freemason. He studied the Kabbalah and the Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia. And I'll talk about them later too. But this is what prompted him to start the order. And then William Woodman, he was a surgeon and also a Freemason. And he also studied under the Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia. And he was a horticulturist.
Nice. Which
comes in handy, I think, when you study magic.
Yeah, knowing herbs.
Yes. And then there was a guy named Samuel Mathers. He actually has a longer name, but for purposes of today, I'm just going to name him Samuel Mathers. He was an occultist and a Freemason. That was his life and his occupation. Him and his wife, Moina, formed the Second Order of the Golden Dawn, which I'm going to discuss a little bit too in a little bit. But this main group is known as a magical order beginning in Great Britain. The intention of the group was to develop themselves spiritually to become more enlightened. The Order of the Golden Dawn originated from a collection of documents known as the cipher manuscripts written in English using a cipher attributed to German scholar Johannes Trithemius. And these manuscripts outlined all of the rituals of the order and prescribed kind of a curriculum of graduated teachings encompassing Hermetic Kabbalah, astrology, tarot, geomancy, and alchemy. Do you know what geomancy is? I don't actually know what that is.
I wanted to say, it sounds like it says something with either earth or math. I'm like,
oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Let's look it up. I'll look it up.
Okay.
Geomancy is a method of divination that interprets markings on the ground or the patterns formed by tossed handfuls of soils, rock, or sand. So it's not math, it's earth.
Earth. All right. I love it. So the first order taught esoteric philosophy based on the Hermetic Kabbalah and personal development through study and awareness of the four classical elements, as well as the basics of astrology, tarot divination, and that geomancy we just talked about. They also practiced a type of white magic called theurgy. Man, I can say other words, but for some reason I can't say these words, like theurgy.
Yeah,
Jeez.
That was the first time I ever heard of it. What is it?
Yeah, it's kind of like a theosophic philosophy, and I think we talked about theosophy once before. Mm-hmm. It's basically, here, I'm going to look it up really quick because my brain sometimes...
I was trying to do the same thing. I had to be like, okay, now let's click on a new link. What is that again?
Yeah. Okay, so it's the operation or effect of a supernatural or divine agency in human affairs. It's just a type of white magic practiced by Neoplatonists. This is pretty much, so here, I said it's pretty much a fancy word for the operation of a spiritual or divine group which affects human affairs.
Dang.
So they're trying to
invoke
change
gods and goddesses.
Yeah.
To help them. Okay. That is crazy. I never would have known that. We just do it, but we don't know why we do it.
But we don't know why we do it.
Or the name of it, yeah.
Yeah. So the order of... Blah, blah, blah. If we were the type of show where you would drink every time I mess up, that's what you would do.
Yeah. New episode for an order of filming it on St. Patty's Day. It's a drinking game.
Yes, a drinking game. The Order of the Golden Dawn were influencers of 20th century Western occultism, like we talked about earlier, and it's mainly Wicca and Thelema that they influenced. Kind of on the sad side, we did find out that these guys were strangely and extremely misogynistic, which, even though they allowed women into the order, they didn't allow, and they say that they were the equals, they weren't really the equals because the women weren't really allowed to be leaders.
Yeah, and it kind of seemed like they wanted them to know a little bit less than.
Right. Which, okay, whatever. I digress. So remember I talked about there was also a second Order of the Golden Dawn. They attempted to master the Enochian magical teachings of John Dee and Edward Kelly, which we go into in some detail in episode 22 when we also discuss alien abduction cases. This order taught proper magic, including scrying, astral travel, and alchemy. And then there was also a third order that was called the Secret Chiefs, who were said to be highly skilled. They supposedly directed the activities of the lower two orders by spirit communication with the chiefs of the second order. So it's all kind of confusing. When you start throwing in orders and temples and all of this, it gets kind of confusing, but you have to kind of cut it down to the basics. And I feel like for that, we have to go into like some history of where their belief system came from. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn comes from a long line of magical practice and has deep roots in alchemy. Once I began researching the order, like a ball of yarn, every thread of knowledge intertwined with an older religion, taking us all the way back, even predating the forming of modern Christianity, which totally blew both of our minds.
It was just so much leading into so much, and it kind of affected me because it's connected to Wicca, and I was just getting kind of shook on how my belief system was structured on this belief system off of this belief system, and I was just like, wow, the interconnectedness is creeping me out.
Right. It really goes all the way back. But in order to study the order, we have to start with the word Hermetic. It's because they're called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Hermetic means relating to an ancient occult tradition encompassing alchemy, astrology, and theosophy. And the introduction of Hermetics into the world began around 4200 BC. That is way before Christianity. It was a time when the Egyptian belief system in the sun god Ra and the cult of Sekhmet was born. This is where magic was born, deep in the land of the Sumerians. And some of this magic was handed down from the gods, and it was known as alchemy.
I did kind of find into the word Hermetic myself too, and I also found out that it means Hermes thrice. I think it's called Majesticus. And Hermes Majesticus, I guess, is a spiritual teacher. He's kind of like a god combo of Thoth, the Egyptian god, and Hermes.
Oh, yeah.
So it's all based off this all like one god. And
right. So the Order of the Golden Dawn was taken also from the Rosicrucian belief system. And after looking at the Rosicrucians on Wikipedia, in the first paragraph, I found this sentence: the cross represents the human body and the rose represents the individual's unfolding consciousness. As with the Golden Dawn and the other offshoots, they were all on the quest for enlightenment and the ability to become light workers for the world, and also finding all of the secrets of the universe. And I don't know, I had a hard time finding out if they were trying to get those secrets of the universe to better the world or to better themselves, or to benefit them progressing in the world monetarily, like for money.
I probably for self-benefit of just to make your life better. Yeah.
Right.
And to gain that secret knowledge.
Right. It's really crazy because I didn't know anything really about the Rosicrucians. I've heard the name. I knew nothing really about them. Like a couple of years ago, Clarissa and I did this kind of hypnosis session, and she was trying to figure out from me what she needed to do in her life. And I told her that she needed to study this. And I have like this weird vision board that we write things on. I guess it's not weird. Everybody has a vision board, right?
Sure.
Sure. Everybody should have a vision board. But on the vision board, on the information that I gave her was that the cross was the body, the rose was the individual's following consciousness. And I didn't know who the Rosicrucians were. I didn't know anything about them. I'm sorry, I'm making a lot of noise, but I had to pull my board out really quick. So I didn't know anything about them. And she did all of this studying about them after that hypnosis session. And I really, she didn't share any of it with me at the time because, it was personal to her. I told her she needed to do it and she did it. And then I told her, I was like, hey, we're going to do Rosicrucians this week. And she goes, oh my gosh, I've been waiting for you to say this. And she pulls out this book with all of this information about it. And so it kind of unraveled this whole thing for me to I just took this rabbit hole and I just fell right into it head first.
Right. And like, it's odd that you were in hypnosis and you said these weird things about the rose and this weird connection.
Right.
Because it's like, where were you getting this information? I feel like you were either channeling it from some sort of like information, I don't know, that you can unlock in deep meditative states. Or
right.
maybe you were channeling like a past life connection.
Right. I like the thought of the Akashic record idea. I never really fully believed in it until I started doing hypnosis and meditation. And that, I feel like every single time I do hypnosis, meditation, or some sort of deep breathing exercises, I feel like information comes to me.
So yeah, it was leading you somehow to this old occult
Yes,
knowledge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's see. The Rosicrucians, they go by several names, and depending on the year and the branch, I found out that they really go back to the times of the Sumerians and the Anunnaki and all of that. They really go back that far, but they were always called something different. It was like there were all of these little secret societies that all had their own thing, but it was based on one main thing. So it was hard to find exactly what name was what for what year. You know what I mean? Because there were so many of them. So it was like there was the Order of the Rosy Cross, the Order of the Golden Dawn, the Rosicrucians, the Rosy Cross, which is different than the Order of the Rosy Cross. There was the Order of the Gold Rose. It was just every group from a different time period, but going all the way back to the beginning of time.
Yeah, probably just different people looking for enlightenment or power and keeping these traditions going.
But the first members, from what I found out, were those seeking to connect with the gods. And I came across this alchemist from Germany. He was there around the 1300s, and he had some strong ties to the Order of the Rosy Cross, and his name was Christian Rosenkreuz. And I feel like this guy is extremely important. He went on a pilgrimage in Egypt where he was taught the ways of the Zoroastrianism, which is one of the oldest religions based on finding inner peace and enlightenment.
You went real far back here in this research.
I did. I was like really going way far back. That his stuff that he learned went pre-Christian, even though he lived in Christian times. He was a huge believer in angels and aliens, and he wrote this book called The Chemical Wedding. I highly recommend this book to anybody who wants to have their mind blown. It's like every page I read of it. I know it's written in a time period from then, but it's still relatable today. He talks about how people are so closed-minded and not wanting to accept anybody for who they are.
Probably revolutionary for at that time.
Yes, very revolutionary for that time. And apparently it was found in his tomb. This book was found in his tomb. And it's not, I think it was really hard for me to spell The Chemical Wedding because he spells it very strangely. But I think it's spelled Chymecil. I might be wrong with that. Anyways, my daughter and I bought this book and we were trying to read it prior to the podcast, but we didn't get the book until just like maybe 2 days ago. So we've been reading it nonstop. But he describes going through portals and getting into a ship, which totally blows my mind. And some people say that the book is based on just something that he made up. And other people believe that what he wrote was what he experienced.
Yeah.
But he talks about kind of doing this ritual in order to go through these portals. It's interesting that the more that I learned about the past, the more I could see connected to aliens and how they shaped our world. He was trying to find connections and ways to live as long as possible from them. And apparently he lived about 107 years. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. So if you look up the book, this is how they're saying it on Wikipedia, that it's an allegorical romance story divided into 7 days or 7 journeys like Genesis, and recounts how Christian Rosencreutz, however you say that, was invited to go to a wonderful castle full of miracles in order to assist the chemical wedding of the king and the queen, that is, the husband and the bride. So interesting how he could be hiding occult knowledge and philosophies in a little story
in this book. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a bunch of allegories in there about what he could be talking about, and I seriously think that when he talks about going through portals in there, that he actually probably went through different portals of existence. Because he talks about stuff that maybe would not have been seen at that time. So he believed in the Philosopher's Stone. And so when they found his tomb, or he believed that he was searching to create a Philosopher's Stone. So in this alchemy that he learned through the Zoroastrianism and the Rosicrucians, he created what I believe might be a Philosopher's Stone. When they found his tomb, they didn't find it until 120 years after his death, which was magically sealed and opened not until after 120 years had gone by. And when they found him, they found this inscription. It said, "Visit the interior of the earth by rectification, thou shalt find the hidden stone." And when they opened his tomb, they found this glowing ball of light that was sustainable on its own, that had been burning for 120 years.
Okay. I'm all like, okay. What the hell? Keep going.
Right? So to me, it meant that he found a way to create this Philosopher's Stone through the alchemy that he learned through the Rosicrucians. He made this secret society called the Rosy Cross, and he formed it with like 3 or 4 guys that he considered to be a brotherhood. So they had to keep it on the down low. It was a secret society. So on the outside life, they were Christians, maybe even Lutherans, I think. I can't remember if it was Christians or Lutherans. They were living this one life and then having this secret society underneath. And this is how he relates to the Order of the Golden Dawn, because he was the founder of this group called the Rosy Cross. The Golden Dawn was also definitely related to the Freemasons. I mean, obviously the founders of them were Freemasons, and the initial rituals of both the Golden Dawn's first and second orders all have a Freemason kind of based structure. And then for those of you who don't know, the Freemasons are an occult movement that began in the 17th century, and they were formed from the basis of reviving parts of the Rosicrucian movement. The specific Order of the Golden Dawn we're talking about today was founded through the Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia, which stands for the Rosicrucianism Society of England. And so the Freemasons were a part of the Rosicruciana in Anglia, which was a part of the Rosy Cross, which is a part of the Zoroastrianism. It's just it was like all convoluted. It was like every time that I found one, I found an older base, an older base, an older base.
Yeah.
An older base.
To me, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn is just kind of like a group of boring men creating complex rules based on other complex rules, based on other complex rules.
Right.
To surmise.
So it's just one thing after another. But when a lot of people put the Order of the Golden Dawn on this kind of pedestal, when there was something else that it was derived from. So I'm sorry if that was confusing. I was trying to go somewhere and I feel like I didn't really hit all the boxes, but
hey, you took a deep ass
I totally
dive.
took a deep dive.
And
yeah.
Now we know so much about where like this all kind of stems from, because I just took it as like the surface level searches here were like, oh yeah, just based on Freemasonry. Boom, that's all I needed to know. But you went really far back and traced it to, I guess, a lot of these crazy organizations, and a lot of the societal occult stuff has been based on so much convoluted stuff.
Right. I felt like I was doing a family tree for it. It was just like, oh, here we go.
I wanted to talk about some of the notable alleged members back to the Order of the Golden Dawn here. Some of the people that kind of rang bells to me when I read that they were in it. And these are alleged, so I don't know exactly how far deep in it they got. So the co-creator of the Rider-Waite tarot deck, Arthur Edward Waite, was allegedly a member, and he created this new tarot system while he was in the Golden Dawn. He basically expanded it because it used to just be like 22 major arcana cards that were in the tarot at that time, and they actually made it 78 cards, so there was the minor arcana, which was actually created by another Golden Dawn member, Pamela Coleman Smith, who was never really credited for all of the work she put into it. She created all of the minor arcana cards, which is like the suits, like you have the wands, the pentacles, the cups, and the swords, and she just developed all of those cards and what they meant, basically, and was getting like keywords from Waite and the other guy who was creating it, a writer. I can't remember his actual full name, but it's called the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot Deck. So this is all comes back to the Order of the Golden Dawn. This is the tarot deck that I use, that a lot of tarot decks are based on.
Right.
All of these ancient philosophies. And apparently Arthur had to keep some of this knowledge confusing and secret on purpose. This is the big deal with people in the Order of the Golden Dawn. They don't want this information to be easily accessible. That's breaking their code of secrecy. You have to be in the group to know the knowledge. So they purposefully made the cards hard to understand and sometimes contradictory. And when I heard that this week, I got a little annoyed and upset. I'm like, damn it, I still use this deck and we're all trying to learn from it, and you purposefully made it confusing for outsiders?
Right.
Holy shit.
Yeah. I have, did I tell you this? I think I told you this. I have a Golden Dawn deck.
Yeah.
From the 70s, and it has a really thick book with it. I read the book, but it's still really confusing
on purpose.
And it's like, exactly. And so I feel like these books are kind of useless. Like, we have to come up with our own interpretation of what the cards mean to us.
Yeah, I think modern day interpretations are way better. Like the little white book you get with a Rider-Waite deck is a laughable joke.
Right.
You just throw that little white book that you get with a Rider-Waite deck away.
You just have to come up with whatever artistry was on the cards in the first place to kind of tell you what the card really means, I feel like. That's my personal opinion. But
yeah, there was also this guy, Charles Henry Allen Bennett, who is known for introducing Buddhism to the West. And I think that there is a little bit of flavor of like yogic breathing and, that kind of Hindu philosophy and Buddhism kind of makes its way into the Golden Dawn a little bit. Also, apparently they had some really cool authors who might have been members, like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes. He was a doctor, a scientist, and actually a spiritualist. The author of The Great God Pan, I think his name is Arthur Machen. I don't know how you actually say that. Machen.
It's either Machen or Machen.
Machen, yeah. So he was a part of the group, and he was really into writing like occult fiction at the time. And also Bram Stoker, the Irish writer best known for writing Dracula, was a part of it. I thought that was pretty cool because we just recently kind of covered him. Yeah. And one of the big names that gets thrown all around a lot when we talk about occult practitioners is Aleister Crowley, which I think when you were pronouncing it properly, it's Crowley. Was a part of the Order of the Golden Dawn. If you don't know who he is, just know that he's kind of an asshole who's really into working with demons, masturbation and cum a lot, and invoking weird, evil, selfish shit. So I can't handle researching him too deeply. I have to take little bits at a time, and every time I look into him, I'm like, oh, God. Like, what else did you do? So I thought he was kind of interesting. I had to cover him if we're going to talk about the Golden Dawn. So something about him is that he was really shooting up through the ranks, and he kept going up through these complex initiation rituals, much to the disappointment of the other members. This one guy in general, S.L. McGregor Mathers, took him under his wing, and there was always a power struggle between the two of the Aleister Crowley and Mathers and these London adepts at the time. They really didn't want him to come any further. They didn't want him to be part of the Second Order, and they were trying to stop him from joining because he was just kind of controversial and weird. and had a lot of opinions. So Crowley turned to Mathers and he was like, they're not going to let me get any deeper into this. Like, can you help me with that? And so he really encouraged Crowley to continue. And he attempted to retake the London Temple on behalf of Mathers by storming in, dressed in a Scottish regalia and wearing a mask on his face. And really this dramatic display didn't help him at all fit in with the order, and he ended up just kind of leaving. Some modern day Golden Dawn groups actually attempt to downplay Crowley's role in this society at all because they don't want to be associated with him. And then others accuse him of betraying the order by publishing its secrets, because he did publish a lot of magical texts.
He did.
And he didn't give a shit about the secrecy stuff. He did try to make it, of course, very convoluted and really hard to understand, but the secrets were out there if you were able to study it. I've had my hands on one of those books, and in reading it, I would have to stop, like, every other word, look it up. What the hell does that mean? Okay, what does that word mean? What does that word mean? Like, it is complicated.
Yeah. And you can't blame them for not wanting to be associated with him, because he's just not a good dude.
No, I was recently looking up him for this, and there's a lot of accusation of him and pedophilia and
oh my gosh,
like having people be sex slaves for rituals and things like that. And that's why I'm just like,
disgusting.
I'm done.
That's not what magic is about. He just learned that from TV.
I'll be honest, I think to a degree a lot of these organizations do incorporate sex magic and incorporate women in their whole groups just so they can have sex magic, just so they can encourage them to go skyclad. So it's really like, I don't know about the Order of the Golden Dawn per se, but I just think that you back in the day had to be careful what you were doing and where you were going as a woman. Of course, we've been fighting for rights for a long time, and so it's just kind of indicative of the time period. And horrid. I want to talk a little bit about the complex magic rituals of the Order of the Golden Dawn. And they really believe in will and being active, and what you put in, you get back. And they do call themselves magicians, actually. And like we did talk about how this was a time of spiritualist movement, of seances and like the Fox sisters and people who were trying to use the Ouija boards, and they would do these like not complex, but I would say fake little seances. And the Order of the Golden Dawn did not like those type of people. And they are connected to the paranormal, but not in the same sense of that at all. They didn't really care about contacting your dead grandma and talking to them, or contacting other people. They wanted to contact other spiritual beings, high-powered beings like gods, angels, archangels, and even demons to help them achieve their goals. So they kind of looked at spiritualist movement as more of a passive thing, where you're just like, hey, what's up? Where being in the Golden Dawn was more of a active thing. You're actively seeking these gods to help you accomplish something.
Right, because they wanted that knowledge. They wanted that knowledge of the universe.
Yeah, and they even just wanted to help them with their daily lives. So they, like we talked about, they have different orders. There's like 5-level orders, I believe, and even orders within those orders, or I should say levels within those orders. The power structure is really complicated, especially in the beginning as you're starting out to try to be in the order. Things like the Kabbalah and the esoteric systems are freaking ancient, confusing, multi-leveled, and super freaking deep. And that way you have to work really, really hard to get in it and be elite to be a part of this organization. Like the rich. You have to be rich enough to have the time to spare to study these things and to get an education, and you really have to be someone like a doctor. Most of these men actually 3 of the men who started it were all doctors. They had their doctorates. And you have to have like really good understanding of the Torah and have like scholarly levels to understand what they're saying, because they use a lot of Hebrew words. It's basically nerdy magician elites is how I kind of look at it. Like a bunch of elite nerdy frickin' dudes who are studying hardcore, learning all this ancient shit, and getting power. But the weird thing is, once you get deeper into the order, the magic actually got easier. So the higher-ups, of course, are always working less, while the people at the bottom are working harder in every kind of organization.
Right.
And this is where the kind of thing of having magical names began. People in the order all had magical names. You wouldn't use like, hey, Bob, what's up? Let's do a spell. You would have to have a really complicated name, and you couldn't know the name of anyone higher up than you. You only knew the names of people on your level or lower, because to know their name is to have power over them, kind of a thing. And all of these names had to be in either Latin or even in some rare cases Gaelic. So like, who the hell knows how to say anything in Gaelic?
Right. Oh my gosh, who would we be? What would our names be?
I don't know. You have to like, what are our qualities? And look up the Latin words of those things.
Right.
And magical names is really a tradition that carries on in Wicca. It's something that some Wiccans love to do. They love to be like, I'm dragon, angel, fairy, pixie dust. And I've read books of Wiccans who like to use that as their pen name. And if they're in covens, they like to use that name. I think when you're part of like a magical subculture, you want to like disassociate from your real life. So you'll use like a fake name. I've never got into that in my magical life because I'm mostly solitary and I just do magic with friends and family. So there's really no secrecy there. The only time I've ever used like a subculture name, which sounds really nerdy, is in the cosplay community. You get like little subculture names. Because at first when I was like researching this, I was like, oh, nerds. They're the only ones that name themselves differently. And I'm like, oh, I am a nerd. And I do have a cosplay name, Sailor Geekette. So when I'm out at conventions, people will use that because of Instagram, and they'll be like, oh, Sailor Geekette, I want a picture. And so it's like, oh yeah, cool. Right. You're no longer Sharon who has a normal job on this. You're just like that little nerd thing. So I tried to like, once again, get off my high horse and be like, you know what, I'm just as weird and nerdy as all these little people are too. And really the only way you get started into the Order of the Golden Dawn is you have to go and kind of like petition at an active temple back then in Britain, and you have to be accepted, and then you go through what's known as the neophyte initiation ceremony, and this level is 0 equals 0. You're nothing. Right. And this is a very complicated ritual that you have to know how to do to even like get in. The ritual, I started reading about it. It kind of starts with really deep meditation where you're transforming your consciousness and awareness. You're trying to like bring yourself to a kind of an alternate reality. And you do this with breathing exercises, which I kind of like thought of these are like yogic breathing exercises where you kind of like breathe up to the count of 4, hold it, release it for the count of 4, that kind of thing. And then once you're really in a trance state of mind, you'll do this ritual known as the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram. And it's to cleanse and purify the area and given to the neophytes of the Golden Dawn to get them prepared and accustomed to dealing with the spiritual realm. And it's also a frequently used component at the beginning and end of many rituals. And first you start the ritual by doing like the Kabbalistic cross, which I guess it's just like you touch the forehead, you bring that energy down to the chest, and then do, I guess, like left or right or left. I don't remember how that works. But so you're just kind of like connecting yourself with the gods and that higher power. And then you would do the banishing pentagram of earth. And that's when you're going to just draw a pentagram in the air with a ritualistic knife, starting from, I believe it's going to be the one point is going to be the lower left. You go up to the tip of the star, down to the right, and then go from there and make your little star. All while when you're in each corner making a pentagram, you have to like say a Hebrew name of a god or some sort of specific word and kind of vibrate that word out into the room. And from there, like my eyes just glazed over in this ritual, and I was like, holy crap, this is so much crazy Hebrew words I cannot say. But it really did kind of freak me out because I do use these pentagrams, these types of pentagrams in my daily cleansing. Like in one of our early episodes, you asked me, oh, Sharon, how do you cleanse your space? And I was like, oh, I go around the room and I do like banishing pentagrams and invoking pentagrams. And I just kind of go with the flow and do that. And like no one ever taught me to do that. I just knew about invoking and banishing pentagrams. And I just naturally did that to clear my space.
It was ingrained in you.
I know.
You were
born
like,
with
that knowledge.
What the frack is this? So that really freaked me out. I see the similarities of like Wicca and my knowledge to this like organization, and I'm just taken aback. Mm-hmm. And from there, this complicated ritual, basically, it's all about becoming one with a god. You visualize yourself in this other reality, and in that reality is where you can transform the world around you and kind of use like law of attraction type thinking to change the outcome of something you're looking for. And the founders of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, they made all of the magical correspondences, probably a lot of what we're still using today, like which stones to use, which crystals to use, which oils are we using, what incense are good for this kind of a spell. And it's creeping me out again. I'm like, oh my God, it all comes back to them. Did they all decide these things, or where did they get that knowledge? Probably
I think it came from older,
like all that stuff you were uncovering.
Right. And just so you know, everything that you explained about the rituals is in that chemical wedding book I was talking about.
That's awesome.
There are different. Yeah. So there are different. He tells it differently a little bit, but just because it's kind of like Easter eggs in the book, I suppose.
That's probably how he got away with the secrecy. Yeah. Keeping it a freaking
Right.
story.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they all use these magical correspondences on like what gods to invoke for a specific spell. They use the tarot when they do magic, and they get into these meditative trance sessions to get the knowledge. So when they're pulling the tarot cards, they're channeling their higher selves and getting knowledges, which is what I do a lot of the time in my circles.
Right.
I'm pulling cards and trying to be like, what do I do with my life? What are the messages you got for me? And this is just like
Right.
crazy. And the magicians use their active will to work with the gods, the correct god, for whatever whatever kind of goal they want to accomplish. And a lot of the times the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, they use really large group rituals, and they're very strict. You've got to know what the hell you're doing. It's very religious and very formal religious high magic. Very
Right.
nerdy, strict magic.
Right.
And you had to use all of your senses. So with your eyes, you had to look the part and wear ceremonial garb and robes. So they're all wearing usually masks at the times and these little robes. For the sounds, you would use the Hebrew god names to invoke them, and they're all the words that you're saying in Hebrew. And for taste, that's when you incorporate like some sort of a sacrament or like something you would eat and the gods would eat, and it connects you with the god, so like a food. And for the smell, it's things like incorporating the incense and what oils to use and what are the good ones to use based on the correspondences. And this is going to fully immerse you in your ritual. And when you're in that deep meditative state, you're focusing on the other reality of yourself and that mutable reality, and you're asking the god to like help you. And while you're doing that, of course, this is where the casting the circle is used. We still do this today, and you use that to keep in all of your magical energy within that circle and magical working space, and you keep all the evil out. And they would do this by using the Hebrew names of gods, and they would write it, I guess, on the floor in a giant freaking circle, and they're just asking and invoking the gods to help you with something specific. And a god, they always knew it was up to the god to decide if they would do it or not. And it's their choice, and that's how what invoking means. You're like, hey, will you help me out? Put it in the hands of your god, basically. You can also cast a triangle, which would be used to evoke with an E. And that's the difference between invoking and evoking, is that you're basically telling lesser or evil beings what to do, and you're controlling them. And so you could use a triangle to evoke a demon, and basically this triangle is going to restrain them, and you use it to your own purposes. And they said if you weren't careful, this demon could even possess you. And this was held as at really a high importance thing to do for Crowley. He really was all about using these demons and these triangles. And it's kind of part of the reason of why he broke off and did his own thing, because everyone else kind of knew that was risky, and we're trying to get higher vibrations and use gods. And Crowley was like, I'm going to take this whole triangle demon thing and run with it. And so that is kind of some of the tip of the iceberg magic and what they're kind of doing. I also wanted to touch base on like the secret sheaths and how they were using them to channel like high energy, and some of the mythos of where that all came from. So going back to like October in 1887, one of the founders, Westcott, he claimed to have written to a German countess and a prominent Rosicrucian named Anna Springle, whose address was said to have been found in a decoded cipher manuscripts. And according to Westcott, Springle, she claimed to have the ability to contact certain supernatural entities known as the secret sheaths that were considered the authorities over any magical order or esoteric organization. So probably these same sheaths were in control of all the organizations that Wendy was mentioning earlier.
Yikes.
Westcott claimed he received a reply from Springle granting permission to establish the Golden Dawn and to make him and his cohorts, Mathers and Woodman, I think is his last name, and himself, all giving them high-level status called the Adeptus Exemptus. And so this is kind of their blessing to start the whole organization. And there really is no evidence of Anna Springle ever existing. She's probably a fictitious character they use to empower themselves and give credence to the order. She is supposed to have held a Rosicrucian ritual and to have nominated Westcott as the head of the Golden Dawn in Britain.
I wonder if Anna Springle is just the name that she went by. that that's not her real name, but maybe she did exist, and maybe that was just the name that she went by in rituals.
Okay.
That was her.
You could be right, because there was another podcast I was trying to listen to on YouTube, and he was trying to say that it might have been a code name for someone else, and that's why they couldn't have found her.
Right.
And it could have been two other people
together. Right, because if you put the name together, Anna Spriggle, it looks like it could be a Latin word. Either
way, the fact that you have to use a cipher to figure out who this person is and where their address is, it's super secretive, and it could all be a lie, convoluted, or it could be more secret stuff to hide the truth of who it was. All right, so basically in 1891, Westcott's alleged correspondence with Anna Spriggle stopped abruptly, and he claimed to have received word from Germany that she was either dead or that her companions did not approve of the founding of the order and no further contact was to be made. So a year later, Mathers said that he finally was able to establish a link to the secret chiefs himself, and that when he came up with the rituals of the second order, that's when he came up with the rituals for the second order, the red rose and the cross of gold. Some followers of the Golden Dawn traditions believe that the secret chiefs were not human or supernatural beings, but just symbolic representations of actual or legendary sources of spiritual esotericism, which means occult knowledge. They looked at the word secret chief to stand for a greater leader or teacher of a spiritual path or practice that found its way into the teachings of the order. If any of that makes sense, guys, just more secret knowledge.
More secrets.
So this is just kind of theories on what the, I guess, secret chiefs are. Who could they possibly be? And here's another theory. So while in Algeria in 1909, Crowley, along with Victor Nuremberg, recited numerous Enochian calls of Aries, which is a type of magic. After the 15th Aerie, he was told that he had attained the Grand of Magister Templi. Basically, he was called the Master of the Temple, which meant that he himself was now on the level of these secret chiefs. And although this declaration caused many legitimate occultists to stop taking him seriously if they had not already done so, he also described the attainment as possible and, in fact, a necessary step for all who truly followed his path. So he's just like, yeah, we can all get this crazy knowledge, and I know how to get it if you follow my path. And in 1947, when Aleister Crowley died, he left behind a sketch of one of the secret chiefs, Crowley's invisible mentor that he called Lam, L-A-M. The sketch looks like a gray alien. I was like, maybe Wendy will like that I can tie it back to an alien.
Yes, I do. Because I'm very certain that aliens are involved in this, but I don't know how yet, and I'll figure it out.
Yeah, I don't know if I would really trust any of Crowley's, visions. He just seems a little bit full of himself, nefarious.
And why was he telling everybody about it? I mean, it's one thing to tell your confidant or a really close friend. Like, I know I tell you everything, but that's different. I don't usually spread it all out on the podcast, or I spread it out to everybody else. But there's a lot of things I keep secret for a reason. Why would he want to tell everybody about it?
About it being an alien?
No, just
about how to get it?
He reached the level, and reached.
I guess because that's what a lot of people claim to do who are trying to sell New Age books and philosophy. Like, you want to know the secret? Buy my book. You want to know how to get this super high level thing? It's in my book. So probably for fame,
for money,
and for he'd like to promote himself as something otherworldly and powerful.
That's just all the wrong reasons, because I feel that's not what any of the orders or the Rosicrucians or anything all the way back to the beginning. I don't think that's what the point was.
I would think it is, because these are all secret societies with secret knowledge, and you have to rise through the ranks to know it, and it's all bullshit.
I think originally none of it was secret, but then when Christianity came around and the Romans and all that other crap, that they started killing people for being different than them, that's when everything started to become secret.
For survival's sake.
Right.
Potentially. A little bit of both. And maybe the further away you get, the more impure it becomes.
Yeah.
So I know you wanted to cover kind of how they disbanded and why.
Yeah. So in 1899, the temples became dissatisfied with Mather's leadership skills. And they also didn't like the fact that he was friends with Aleister Crowley. Plus, remember you were talking about earlier how he had made it up through the ranks. which they didn't want to happen. And the temples wanted to make contact with the secret chiefs themselves instead of relying on Mathers as a kind of a go-between. So at one point you talked about Crowley petitioned to become a member, and he was refused initial initiation by the London officials, but Mathers overrode that decision, and that's when you were talking about how they initiated him in with that little headdress thing. And at that point, the London Temple wanted Mathers and his order to be closed down. He wanted everything to be stopped. And the temple wrote Mathers telling him to resign as Crowley's representative, but Mathers believed Westcott was behind this and couldn't understand why they wouldn't want to have Crowley involved. Which in my mind blows my mind because Crowley was such a bad person from everything that we've read. So I'm just like, ooh, why do you want to align yourself with this dude?
And it's kind of interesting because he says that he was drawn to this stuff initially because of the oppression of Christianity, which is something a lot of people can relate to. The oppression of really loud religions telling you what to do, how to think, how to be, who you are, that kind of thing. Sure, oppress it, but he just went so hardcore opposite with it that it was kind of evil.
He took it to a weird level. Well, anyways, they formed a committee in London, at which point an investigation of how Crowley became a member. They just decided to form this committee and figure out what happened, and they wrote Mathers and demanded information. Mathers responded by declining to provide any proof, refusing to acknowledge the London Temple, and dismissing this dude Farr as his representative, because everybody had a representative. It was like everybody had, like you were talking about, everybody had some sort of hierarchy in this place. In response, the temple met and decided to remove Mathers as the chief and expel him from their particular order. And that's where the second order came about. They started closing certain orders. The second order came about, then, which they named the Alpha et Omega. He ended up moving things to America, and where they opened up a temple in Chicago. By the beginning of 1914, Mathers had established 2 to 3 American temples, and then by the 30s, most of the temples were closing or were empty. I think at that same time, everything was closing in London. They were just closing each of the temples one by one. And it didn't really tell me as to why. It just felt like they were all going their separate ways.
Yeah, I'm imagining that's like a giant organization with a lot of big personalities, a lot of weird spiritual, religious beliefs and paths, and trying to merge all of that. I'm sure there becomes tension or just like wanting to grow, like you said, in different directions.
Right. And plus people who initially started them were dying because of the age. I mean, it's not like they could live forever. And the younger people didn't want to be a part of it. I think that they saw, what? You want me to do what? This just doesn't fall in line with what my beliefs are.
Too rigid probably to make it sustainable long term.
Right. And I didn't know it initially, but I found that there were orders of the Golden Dawn temples all over the world, including New Zealand. And I think I read that the New Zealand temple called Smaragdum Thalasses, which was in Havelock, North New Zealand. It was the last one to close. It was the last one open, and that was in 1978. So I did some research online too to kind of find out if there were any still in existence that might be secret. I found 2 websites, but it looked like they were rivaling against each other. One was saying that they were going to teach the full, true stuff behind what Mathers's viewpoints were. And they wanted money, and they wanted, they said, if you give us this money, we'll give you these lessons, and you'll learn all of it through these lessons on tape. And I was like, okay, is this real? Is this fake? What is this all about? And then there was another chapter that just was basically not really saying, join us. They were wanting to give you all of the information about what the order did.
Mm-hmm. I don't like anything that has to do with organizations with levels and telling you what you
Right.
need and who's above you. I remember going
Right.
to like a Wiccan thing down at the mall, and I was like, whoa, this is so cool. My community is opening up, and there's like pagan events. And the pagan people that were there were mostly these older people, and they had these like really cool like moon labyrinth and cool like offerings of this neat land that you could go do magical rituals on. And I was like, oh, what are the rituals? And they're like, oh, we can't tell you, you just have to like go and find out. And then I just kind of got the sense that it was weird, and they had weird Wiccan names, and this older guy was like, yeah, I'm this level and she's that level. And as soon as I heard levels, I was like, I am not going. Like, whatever that is, that is some sort of hierarchy bullshit. Like, I think it's spiritualism. Right. We are all kind of on the same level that you need to be on your own individual journey.
Right. Sharing a space with each other and goodness and happiness. Yeah. Not just, how crazy. I just feel like initially when we went in to study about the Golden Dawn, and I was initially thinking about the Rosicrucians, I just thought, yay, I'm going to learn about our history and it's going to be really great. I'm super excited. And then I felt kind of defeated a little bit in some instances, just because we don't want to be associated with people who are putting down women or putting down, I don't know the words I guess I'm really looking forward.
Elitism.
Yeah, I don't want to be a part of an elitist society. I want to be all encompassing of love, which goes back to that Chemical Wedding book that I'm kind of reading, is that he talks about how you have to find your own path. It's not about what other people are trying to tell you. And he talks about how everybody should be treated with love and respect and equality. And you should know your own life and not be so concerned about all of the distractions that other people give you.
And I'm really interested in just like the magical aspects of it all. I love finding that stuff out. So I'm going to keep looking into our origins of magic. Anything else you want to talk about the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn? Like, I know it's been a long interest of yours for a while. Yeah,
it has been. I think it all stemmed for me like when we did that hypnosis session, as far as the Rosicrucian section goes. But the Order of the Golden Dawn, I found those cards, my tarot deck, and I didn't know who they were, so I really wanted to talk about it. Like, if I'm using their deck, I needed to know who these people were, and now I'm just like, should I still use this deck of cards?
I think you have to, like, take that time to reflect on that question. Oh my God, I was going to give you their steps of how to reflect and get knowledge. I was going to be like, well, you should meditate and relax and pull some tarot cards and get into a transmittive state and ask that question. Yeah. Should I use their cards? And then it's going to be like, yes, use our system. I love it. Alien lords are going to be like, yeah, dude, use our cards.
Well, I do believe in aliens, so okay. I think I'm all talked out on this subject for today.
On that note, guys, let's keep riding this weird wave. If you're down for more knowledge, we are definitely going to keep looking for it. So thanks for listening, and please join us next Wednesday when we're going to be discussing my experience and some history on the Minger Hotel and its paranormal little ghosts. You can always find us on Instagram and Facebook, and don't forget to check us out at our blog at cousinscoven.home.blog, where you can find our witchy words of wisdom, spells, and all of our archive podcast episodes. And while you're there, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter. Just give us your email and we can go ahead and send you that newsletter. And our current podcast episodes can be found on Podomatic, Spotify, iTunes, and anywhere else podcasts can be found.
May you find happiness in your heart, love for yourself, and join each other. Blessings to all.